right, since this quarterback class is expected to be below average, more teams might look to free agency to try to buy a year or two before trying to find their franchise guy in the draft. We asked each one of you to come up with your top free agent quarterbacks. Danny, give us your top 5.
So I think number 1 is probably the easiest one on here. I think it's Jameis Winston, hands down, because he's still 28 years old, former number 1 overall pick. We saw what he can do top end. Like, we've seen the ceiling. We just need to make the floor a little bit higher and eliminate some of those mistakes that he was making. And he started to do that after watching Drew Brees, getting in Sean Payton's system. I thought you saw a little bit more consistency there out of him. And I also think you might be able to get a pretty good deal on him coming off an ACL surgery. So I think Jameis Winston is the top, and it's kind of in a class all by himself because it's not a great free agent class. I had Teddy Bridgewater as another one, a guy who played pretty well for Denver last year. I worry about the top end. Like, his arm strength just isn't quite there, but he's going to manage the game for you. Can handle any system, can come in, be a good leader for the locker room. And then Mitchell Trubisky is a kind of a one I threw in here, and I think Brady put me onto him first. He's 27 years old. He's played a lot of football. He's a 64% completion guy. He's got a pretty solid 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. That's not outstanding in Hall of Fame by any means, but he's still young. And he was thrown into the fire in Chicago. Now he's had some time to sit back, relax, watch Josh Allen, be in another system, kind of take his breath. I think if you were looking to give a guy a second chance, Mitchell Trubisky would be a great quarterback to do that with. Tyrod Taylor, to me, coming at 4 is clearly a bridge quarterback at this stage in his career. And then Marcus Mariota, I think, is another guy good in the locker room, can come in, start a few games for you if you get in a bind, but primarily a backup. You could utilize his legs somewhat similar to what they did with the Raiders a little bit. But out of all of these, Jameis Winston, I think, is kind of in a class all by himself.
So I'm right there with you in regards to Jameis Winston. I've got him number 1 overall. He is the top free agent draft prospect. This is obviously assuming a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, for example, or Tom Brady, Tom Brady retired. He's not a free agent, still under contract technically. But a guy like Ben Roethlisberger, who is a free agent, but also retired, isn't coming back. So let's get that out of the way. But it is Jameis Winston. It's not necessarily the best free agent quarterback draft class. That being said, I still think Jameis Winston has done a lot in this league so far to prove otherwise. The next group of quarterbacks I've got, and I do have Mitchell Trubisky in there, but I got him at 5, and reason being is this. If you look at this group, whether it's Cam, who's been a league MVP before and gone to a Super Bowl, Teddy Bridgewater, who, as Danny Kanell just talked about, very, very solid. He's not going to hurt you. He's not necessarily going to wow you, but, kind of solid in that regard. And Tyrod Taylor's got a lot of experience, played in many different systems. All those guys could come in, start some games. They'd be serviceable for you. You kind of know what you're going to get from them, at least at this point in time in their career, which is why I've got them ranked where they are. And then I've got lastly is Mitchell Trubisky, where I've got him in top 5, but I think as far as someone after Jameis Winston that you might say, hey, let's kick the tires on this guy. Let's see what he learned from his time, sitting and watching in Buffalo and how much he's improved since then. He might be that second quarterback you actually look at and take. But again, it takes you being in a situation where you're willing to take that risk. And you're not drafting a guy necessarily to come right behind him, because then what's the point of signing him in the first place? So that's my top 5. But again, I think it's Jameis Winston. I'm right there with DK. That's number 1 in this class.
Brady, how many free agent quarterbacks do you think will start week 1?
I would say if you set the over-under at 1/2, I would probably take the under. I just think when you look at the number of quarterbacks that potentially could be on the move who are under contract, we're talking veteran quarterbacks, there's the potential for teams with a quarterback need filling their voids there. And then in exchange, you're going to see a lot of swapping potentially. For example, if Aaron Rodgers decides to leave Green Bay and go to, Tennessee, you'd have to think that the Packers have Jordan Love sitting there. They just elevate him now to be the starting quarterback. Well, what happens to Ryan Tannehill? If he's potentially on the market to be traded for, he'd go right at the top of this list. Now, granted, he's not going to be a free agent, but he'd be a tradable asset. So you have to think about those sorts of scenarios, and I think you're going to see more, movement this offseason between guys who are under contract, veteran guys who can get it done. And then we're looking at the draft, and we're looking at 3 capable, maybe 4 capable quarterbacks, depending on what team you are, at drafting one of those guys and putting him in there week 1 to be your starter. So I don't see with this year's free agent draft class, many teams going that direction. I think they trade for one or they end up drafting one.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a wild offseason with quarterbacks because, we've got these rumors, quarterbacks that may want out, a guy like Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, rumors circulating. Because with this quarterback draft class, the free agent class being as weak as it is, that's going to make some teams maybe get a little bit desperate and maybe make a big move and try to follow a model that the Rams just won a Super Bowl with, going all in on a Matthew Stafford. That being said, I'm on the over here because I think you'll see. I think Jameis Winston starts somewhere week 1. I think, again, he's in the class by himself. I think he'll command a deal that'll be all right. You're the starter. You're the guy. Here are the keys to the kingdom. We'll give you the opportunity. And then where the second free agent starter comes from, I think is going to be a place that's going to, like a lot of the teams that we talked about earlier with the draft, Washington, New Orleans, if they don't go Jameis, a place like that where you draft a young quarterback and you need that bridge quarterback to come in, start until he's ready. Because again, I don't think any of these quarterbacks are going to be ready week 1. They might be ready week 8. We're not even ready, but to kind of play them early. So I would say one of these other free agent quarterbacks gets to start week 1. But I don't know. I would set the number at 1.5 to make it a little bit more interesting. And I might take the under there, but I'll go ahead for this exercise. I'll say 2 free agent quarterbacks in this group we're talking about. We'll be starting week 1.
All right, Danny says 2. Brady says likely 0. Danny Kanell, Brady Quinn with us here on CBS Sports HQ. Ryan Wilson has a brand new first-round mock on CBSSports.com. No skill players until number 10 overall, with Drake London, the wide receiver out of USC, going to the Jets in their second of 2 first-round picks. We'll have full coverage with Ryan Wilson and Emory Hunt coming up at 4 o'clock Eastern time as we go through the entire first-round mock.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.